Hi, I'm Redbeard. I'm passionate about infrastructure and about free software. Today, we need to have a bit of a frank discussion about etcd. For the folks who have even heard of it, which is a shockingly small number, most think of it as the database behind the scenes of Kubernetes. Really, it's more of a key value store, but we'll leave the nuances of that for another day. Over the years, there's been one single conversation that I've had variations of at least 100 times. Generally, it's with customers or field teams, occasionally with a product manager, and every once in a while with an engineer or three. And every single time I finish the conversation, I sit back and I sigh with both relief and a non-zero amount of contentment. Oh, sure. Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Oh, I'm happy. Hopefully it resolves all the issues and everybody's happy at the end. Uh-huh. Of course. Yeah, be seeing you. Bye-bye. Thank God I never need to have that conversation again. And then it happens again. The dreaded conversation that I'm talking about is all about how etcd works under the hood, and more specifically about how it maintains quorum and high availability. So today, we're going to have a Redbeard over-explanation so that you, dear viewer, can stop being the mote in my eye, which makes me and other engineers cry. Because I'm based in the United States, I'm going to use a few locations that I'm familiar with. The same principles apply to other locations as well. Let's say you've got a primary colocation site. If you're like a lot of companies, it's likely to be in Ashburn, Virginia. And like any dutiful infrastructure person, you've probably got a secondary site. Ours is located in San Jose, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. These are pretty far apart. Ideally, they should be at a safe distance to protect against pesky outages, like tornadoes and global thermonuclear war. Before we go on, though, we need to anchor our understanding on some common facts. The speed of light in a vacuum is almost 300 million meters per second. The speed of light in glass fiber is a bit under 200 million meters per second. Still pretty fast. But it is a decrease of just around a third. In a vacuum, that means that photons could travel the distance from Ashburn to San Jose in about 12.6 milliseconds. If we had a single strand of unbroken fiber going that distance, we could send a pulse of light from one end to the other in about 19.2 milliseconds. Add a mirror on one side, and that round-trip speed is about 38.4 milliseconds. There is one problem, though. This is a theoretical minimum. In the real world, we'll have a combination of intermediate routers and a path which is probably not going to be a straight shot. Realistically, I don't see these speeds. A much more common speed, in my experience, is about 85 milliseconds. If you're running etcd, it's probably in a cluster of 3 to 5 machines, and this example isn't going to be any different. The challenge arises, though, when my enterprise architect comes along, attempting to throw a wrench in my plans.
Hey, Alex, happy to take a few seconds. What's going on? What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey Redbeard. Hey, so it's great that we've got this cluster in Ashburn, but I was wondering if we might be able to move one of the nodes to San Jose in order to improve our high availability story. Are you okay? Is that not a good idea? Hmm.
At this point, I need to tell you some lies. These are the sort of lies like when you were learning high school physics. You know, electrons are the smallest particle in the universe, a nucleus is made of protons and neutrons, and at the same time, they're skipping right over gluons, up quarks, down quarks, bosons, muons, neutrinos, etc. To start, the most important tunable for etcd is disk speed, and even more specifically, disk latency. And even more than that,
how data is replicated across them. So all of this gets coordinated by a leader. And then the basic workflow looks something like this. We read from the client and hold the connection open. We write the value to the leader, which is really, we write to the journal on the disk, then we write the value out to the followers, who then commit the value, and then these followers confirm these commits back to the leader, and the leader verifies the write as quoted. After this has been verified, the leader will confirm the write to the client and release the connection. This is kind of the big deal. Note, we hold the connection open, the leader verifies the write as quoted, and then we release the connection. etcd is checking the number of healthy nodes by doing a good old-fashioned floor of n over 2 plus 1 routine. In our case, we got 3 nodes, and the floor of that over 2 plus 1 means we need to have 2 nodes online in order to be healthy. So, now back to our bonehead who suggested moving one of those nodes out to the West Coast. Let's walk through what happens when the node in San Jose goes down. Since we have 2 nodes in Ashburn, when that node in San Jose goes down, everything looks good. I mean, even if they're not in the same data center, the latency difference between these locations on the East Coast is effectively 0 in the grand scheme of things. So everything seems fine. But what happens when it's one of our East Coast nodes which goes down? In that case, every single mutation to the key store comes with an 85 millisecond latency. That means that every single time we go to write a value, we are going to hold that connection open from the client will issue the write, and then we are going to have a minimum of 85 milliseconds in every single case before the leader will verify that write as quoted. Because we have to write that value all the way to the West Coast, and then we have to wait for the response. And again, that 85 millisecond latency is a theoretical minimum. If you're going to try to structure things in this way, this is just the cost of doing business. Which is, of course, to say, don't structure things that way. That's a horrible way to do this. And yet, I hear people suggest this. You can't argue with physics. You just can't. As much as I would love to, you just can't. So please, quit this. There's so many other things that I want to say, but it's not work appropriate, so I'm going to keep it together. But sheesh, you'd think that this was a little simpler to understand. Come on.